All right, so before I leave the stage and let her do her reading, I would like to ask you a few questions. So first of all, who are you?
Well, I am a writer, originally from the Midwest, relocated.
Where in the Midwest?
From Chicago originally,
Okay.
spent 6 years in Minnesota. So if you are thinking I'm from Canada, you're close, but I'm not. Have been trying to shake the accent for about 5 years now here on the East Coast. Live in Maryland with my husband, who's here in the audience. Hi. And our 3 kids, we have 3 teenagers. We're about to be down to 2 because one is going to turn 20.
Oh, okay, I was like, whoa, it just turned dark.
I'm getting rid of one. No, she's just aging out of the age group.
Okay, fair enough. So you've been taking some workshops here as part of your fellowship, correct?
I have. I've been very fortunate to be able to do that for the last year. Provided up to 8 workshops, and I've been able to take 4 at this point.
Okay.
And they've all been extremely helpful, so it's been a great gift.
Who is your favorite instructor at the Writer Center? And bear in mind, I'm going to tell all of them. You answer. Okay, you don't have to answer that. I'm just joking. No, is there anything that stood out from this program? I'm interested in this program too because I'm fairly new myself, so I'm actually just kind of curious about how it's worked out for you.
Sure. The fellowship was to support the writing of the novel that I'm going to be reading an excerpt from this evening, and it's magic realism. So when I saw that there was a workshop on that with Ray Bryant, I decided that that would be a really good workshop to take, and I found that that was really helpful in kind of trying to piece together some outstanding areas where there were rough spots, things that I needed to kind of tighten up, and she did a really great job of walking me through those.
Fantastic. So, what are you working on the novel now? Is the novel done? Is that your project?
I have finished the first draft.
Clap, everyone.
I finished the first draft about a month ago, and it has been sitting in the desk drawer, simmering and stewing and kind of percolating for the last month. And next week I'll be starting on the revision process.
Next week?
Next week.
October 1st?
October 1st.
Oh, yes. New month, new draft.
Yes.
And can you recommend a book? What book have you read lately or one that you love that you can recommend to our audience here?
Well, the book that I always go to, it's my favorite one. It's Good Omens, The Nice and Accurate Prophecies of Agnes Nutter Witch, which is a really long title, by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. It is my absolute favorite. Some people reread Jane Austen or Pride and Prejudice. I reread Good Omens every year, at least once.
All right, well, I'm done. Please, give us your reading. Thank you so much.
Thank you. In my novel in progress, The Day the Music Didn't Die, Ray Hall, co-owner of a failing celebrity impersonator bar in Deadwood, South Dakota, is devastated by grief and guilt after causing his 14-year-old son Donnie's death in a drunk driving accident. Seeking solace, Ray completes the restoration of a vintage Wurlitzer jukebox he and Donnie were fixing up together, and discovers in the process that the jukebox is a portal into the afterlife, one that will bring Ray improbable visitors, fresh threats to his sobriety and his sanity, and perhaps the tiniest hope for redemption. Ray downed the last of the Old Crow and kicked the empty under the bar before turning his attention back to the jukebox. He'd gotten pretty good at hiding his drinking again from Marilyn. He only drank on nights he knew she had a gig, because then he knew she couldn't check up on him. Hiding it from his best friend Jens was even easier. Even though he co-owned the bar with Ray, once the club closed for the night, Jens took off, usually with a female patron. He rarely came back to check on anything then. Once Ray had the tube in place, it took him 3 fumbling tries. At long last, he plugged the old girl in and was rewarded by her blaze of glory. The battered Wurlitzer 1015, better known to Ray and his regulars as Bubbles, had come up in an estate auction in Lead a couple years earlier, just before Ray and Donnie's mom Brenda had split up. The 1015 has been called the most iconic jukebox in Wurlitzer's history. Crystal arteries of bubbling amber and rose and key lime, pulsing golden light stroking the body's graceful curves. The honey-smooth glide and drop of a shining disc onto the velvety turntable. When they're all fixed up, those bubblers are some fine, sexy machines. Instant desire had seized hold of both Ray and Donnie, who had just turned 12. What do you think, Donnie? Should we do it? Ray had asked. Donnie had beamed up at him. Hell yeah, Pop, she's sick. to the auctioneer and laid down all the money they had, including some he had earmarked for less seductive purchases like rent and groceries and a new alternator for Brenda's car. Ray, are you kidding me? $9,000 and the damn thing don't even work. What about my car? Brenda screeched at them in the middle of the auction lot, but Ray and Donnie didn't hear a word she said. They had lugged the old heap back to the bar and installed her there in the corner, where father and son spent long, happy hours tracking down spare parts, tinkering and testing, polishing and shining until she gleamed like new. They visited countless antique shops, estate sales, and flea markets, collecting old 78s, mainly Elvis Presley, Donnie's favorite, and planning which song each would choose to play first. Ray voted for Jim Reeves' He'll Have to Go, but Donnie, devoted Elvis fan right from the womb, voted for Rip It Up, his favorite of the dozens he and Ray had collected on their scavenger hunts around the state. After months of work, the last part they had been waiting for, a bubbler tube, back-ordered for weeks, had finally arrived at the post office, which was about to close for the long Labor Day weekend. They'd both been hoping to finish her before school started, when they'd have far less time to be tinkering together. Come on, Dad, if we hurry, we can make it. We can finish her this weekend, Donnie had pleaded. All right, Ray had said. He washed down the last of his burger with the rest of his beer and slid off the bar stool, fumbling in his pocket for the keys. Ray thought of those keys now, watching the jukebox complete at last. She shimmered and sparkled in the darkened bar, a true beauty, even with her empty 78 slots, like so many missing teeth. Ray had removed every last Elvis record Donnie had so lovingly curated. Donnie's favorite, Rip It Up, he'd snapped that over his knee and hidden the pieces in the bottom of his desk drawer. It had taken him weeks even to look at Bubbles again, and tonight it had taken him nearly a third of a bottle of Old Crow to work up the courage to open the blood-stained box the deputy had returned to him that afternoon. The missing bubbler tube, the only thing in his car that had survived that night utterly unscathed. Without warning, Ray shoved the jukebox now, hard, trying to beat back the sound of the brakes like banshees in his ears, the image of Donnie's broken body on the stretcher, the thud of the dirt clods hitting his son's casket. And when the shoving didn't work, Ray kicked and clawed at the brackets and trim he and Donnie had restored. Grunting and sweating, he drew back his hand and with his last punch cracked the glass, bloodying his fist. Spent, Ray draped his body over the damaged jukebox, blood trickling down the shards of glass jutting up from its case. The air in the bar now was silent and still, save for Ray's heaving breaths, which slowed and softened in the expectant hush. When he was calm again, Ray stepped back and surveyed the damage, shaking his head. Then he bent down and pulled the plug from the wall. As he crossed the bar, a quiet whir behind him caught his ear, followed by the click and tumble of machinery smoothly engaging. He turned slowly. The corner of the bar was aglow with lavender and amber and emerald hues. He stumbled toward the jukebox, rubbing his eyes. She was alight, all right, and bubbling away. Ray watched, open-mouthed, as the needle lowered to the unexpected vinyl disc that had appeared below it. When the first notes of Elvis's Rip It Up began, Ray's wobbly legs betrayed him, and he sank to his knees, crying out for Donnie. Wait, I took that out, he choked, crawling the rest of the way to the jukebox. I took them all out. When he reached the wall beside Bubbles, he pulled himself to his feet. Then he felt his way around her back, following the cord down, along the baseboard, and all the way to the outlet's 2 empty sockets, and the plug lying there lifeless. Crying out for Donnie again, Ray slumped to the floor, leaned back against Bubbles, and let the sobs overtake him, the bourbon, snot, and tears scorching his throat. Until a polite throat clearing from somewhere in the otherwise darkened bar startled him to his feet. Who's there? He yelled, swiping at his eyes. A man, young and solid enough, stepped out from the shadows of the hall leading to the restrooms. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you, the voice said, soft but penetrating with a gooey southern accent. "Step out where I can see you," Ray said. He flicked on the light switch beside the bar. In the soft lighting, Ray thought for a moment the stranger might have been a young Elvis Presley. The same shiny ebony hair, the same impossibly blue eyes, the same ridiculous dimples and the roguish smile he flashed now at Ray. "The door was open. I hope you don't mind. Are you Ray Hall? I'm looking for him," the young man said. Ray, furious that the stranger might have witnessed his tears, stalked closer to the young man, who retreated a couple of steps. "I heard you might have a job opening," the young man said. "Do you remember me?" He half smiled and then crooned, "Are you lonesome tonight, Elvis?" Ray cut off the young man's singing, in no mood for an audition. He rifled every square inch of his memory, trying to remember the young man or any job openings, but came up empty-handed. "Like Elvis?" "Yes, sir," the young man said. "For the show?" Ray asked. "Sure," the young man said. He jutted one leg out to the side and sang, "One for the money, two for the show." Ray cut him off again. "Yeah, I know Elvis." He didn't remember this particular one, though. Something about the young man's bold smile and glittering eyes, so like the original and yet so not, made Ray wonder if he was hallucinating. Either way, he didn't trust the young man's story about a job offer. He bent down with a grunt and picked up the old crow bottle he had kicked aside earlier and thunked it on the bar. "Look, it's late. I'm closed. You need to leave now." Ray headed toward the door. "Donnie told me to come," the voice whispered in his ear, chilling his skin. "What?" Ray whirled around. The young man was nose to nose with him now. "How do you know my son? I mean, how did you know him?" "You were right the first time, Ray," the stranger said. "I do know Donnie, and I can help you both." He held out his hand. The two stood close enough now for Ray to follow the curve of each luxurious eyelash, to marvel at the unnatural silvery flecks in those blue irises, to smell the faint, unsettling hint of his cologne. Close enough to feel in his suddenly roiling gut that whoever, whatever, was standing before him at that moment was no impersonator. Elvis had entered the building. Thank you.